here we are. It's a Saturday night. It's been a long day at the jail, several hours before we're formally arrested. The sun has not set, but it's beginning to become noticeably that the day is coming to a close. We're not going to be released from the visits with the judge, the pre-judge, and the trial judge in this Napoleonic judicial system where you're guilty. So someone has to charge you with a charge, and then a judge makes an initial assessment as to, do we send you home and then just expect you'll come back the next day and we'll talk more about it, or do we hold you until we get more details? And so that's what the case was. We're not, even though we are detained, we're really not essentially arrested until we have a charge, technically. But there's also no way to explain the fact that we could not go anywhere else. So we were technically arrested that Saturday night, and then began the long wait for what does all of this mean. So maybe let's just start with Silas, and we're trying to think through and what are the memories of those days. But Silas, how would you describe what it was like on the other side of those bars whenever we first walked in to the other side of the bars? Yeah, physically. How would you describe it?
So it's all concrete, floors, walls, kind of a concrete bleacher sort of a thing along the edge of the walls. The ceiling was like a corrugated metal or something like that, kind of open rafters. I think pretty much right away we knew we could break out if we wanted to. But it was dirty. There was kind of so we were in the men's side of the holding cell sort of thing that we had. And there was 2 rooms on the men's side, just open. There's not doors on the rooms. And kind of a long hallway in front of the 2 rooms. And then at the end of the hallway is kind of the no-go zone. You only went there if you had to. And that consisted of the bathroom area that we can talk about sometime, not over a mic'd system. And there was maybe at one point some showers back there, and there was a constant running source of milk, maybe. I think it was water, but it had a very milk-like color and consistency to it. And there was I can't remember off the top of my head how many other men are on our side with us. Probably 10 or so. 10 or so men. They moved out of one of the rooms and kind of let us have that. And so the boss guy and his fellow higher up in the prisoners slept in the other room, and the guys that moved out of the room slept in the hallway. So it was there was definitely not room for nearly 20 people to be living in this area. But as far as just the physical, there's one window up real high, just a long window, and there's a window into the guard's office as well, that you could see the women's holding cell from there.
Yeah. Steve, what are some things that you can recall visibly of that physical structure of the rooms we were in? How would you describe it in addition to what Silas is saying?
To me, it was very dark. It was like being in a basement with the light turned off. And there was one light that was in the main, where I call them the Barney Fife sheriffs were at. And it was very obvious that we could get out very easily. And Jim had a plan, but I don't think we could outrun the bullets. But it was, there was one area, like he said, you didn't want to go in there because it just stank really bad. It was terrible. And if you've been in a holding pen for cows that's 3 foot deep, you know what it's like, and you go back there and it was just a terrible place. And we finally, at the end of it, got it cleaned up. But it took us a long time to clean it all up. So
They might like us to come back and clean it up a bit again. I remember when the Red Cross showed up. We're probably well into the end of the first week, and the French Red Cross are the ones who showed up, and the septic system was backed up, which is why the bathrooms was in such horrible shape. I don't remember it being that deep, but it was bad.
It was terrible in there.
And so it was an unsanitary place, no doubt. And when I just remember that once they got the septic system where things would actually flush out of the bathroom, that I was one happy man. It still stunk. I didn't want to go back there still. But you're walking through wet. I'm sure it's mostly urine, and then you're going to later use your shoes as a pillow. So it's clear that all of the electrical had been broken off. Inmates in the past had basically stripped everything out of the place, of anything that would be considered a convenience. It was completely gone. So when you're seeing for the first time the living quarters, we don't know how long we're going to be there. Will it be one night? Will it just be through the weekend? Everyone, all of the police are telling us, "Oh, you're going home Monday." Once this all gets sorted out, you guys will be back out of here and away you go. And even then, they're telling us that you'll be able to go and get the children and continue on your way. Of course, none of that happens, and everything changes when we go to court. But anything else that you guys would say as we're being processed from this side in the police headquarters into the jail? Anything else that you could recall, whether physical or spiritual? What were some of the things that perhaps you were sitting on in your mind? And do you remember those days? Those first couple of hours?
Actually, before we went in there, it was really interesting to me that they tried to get us to sign some books in the very beginning. It was okay. We had to sign our names in there, and I remember Laura, they reading off all this stuff to her, and she went and signed her name in this book. And Drew started asking, what is this? What is this for? And he was the next one that was up, and so he said, I don't want to sign my name unless I understand exactly what's going on. And it ended up being where they wanted us to admit to we were stealing these children and we were doing all these things, and it was like Drew's going, no, I'm signing that. It's not true. I'm not going to do it. And so I was so thankful for him doing that. It was just amazing to me that he had enough gumption to sit down and go, well, wait a second, I'm not going to sign my name to that. So to me, I thought that was very wonderful. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think in ignorance I'd have said, sure, what am I supposed to sign? So do you remember, I don't know at what point I remember learning that the process this is how it's going to be, this is what it's going to look like on the other side of these. I'm not thinking about, okay, how are we going to eat and where are we going to sleep and getting all those kinds of things worked out. But somewhere pretty soon we discover that the only way we eat in this Napoleonic judicial system in Haiti is if our families bring meals to us. The only way, other than the pile of blankets that were offered to us, that we don't know how long they had been there, nor what was living in them, which could have something to do with all of the bug bites you had. Not that you were using those blankets, but they were in the atmosphere of the place. But do you remember your first meal at all, by the way? Either one of you?
Yeah, we had some MREs, and we went into the women's lockout, and we sat on the floor and had our MREs there. That was the very first one we had, but
I had totally forgot that we had done that. From time to time, they would let us out of our cell, and we'd get to go sit down in a, not very often, but I think in that first night, because we had an interview with CNN, it wasn't Anderson Cooper, but it was his on the site, Carl something.
Carl. Yeah, Carl.
That he had an interview with all 10 of us, and at that point, CNN is the ones who actually provided our first meal, the MREs. And I'm sure that it was somewhat of a hope to get more information out of us that they could exploit or what have you. So, yeah, that first night's meal was kind of like, okay, here's a tip to you. We know you're not guilty, and so we're going to make your existence here as pleasant as possible. And you get to have a meal. We also had our first visit from the U.S. consulate that night. That was probably for me the reality of realizing we are on our own. So this is a word to the wise. Whenever you travel out of the country, do not expect the U.S. consulate to come do anything for you. It's not their job. Their job is to make sure you're alive. Their job is to make sure that, this thing is completely off. That's why you're bringing that to me, aren't you? Their job is to make sure that you're alive, and their job is to make sure that if there's any correspondence from home, that they can get it to you. But they came in with sheets of paper with names of lawyers for us to contact. I should say we made good use of the list that they gave us. We gave all the paper to Silas, and it became his art pad because I don't know that we ever tried to call any of those numbers.
They were pre-earthquake. No, the lady said most likely at least half of these are no longer alive or even reachable.
Right. So
we got a lot of pens from them too.
So we did. We had lots of writing utensils, and so many of. At some point, you need to just say, Silas, I want to see your notebook, and let him show you some of the drawings. He drew pictures of several of the inmates. He kind of narrated the time with pictures, illustrations, the rooms we were in. I don't know. Did you ever get one of the rat? No, good. So there's a lot we want to talk about in the experience side of it. Is there anything that you would say that you would recall to be your best memory of those days? It's a strange question, but I want to know. What were your best memories of those days?
Actually, the singing. We spent a lot of time praising the Lord, and you don't really think about, Silas and Paul. I was in prison with Silas and Paul. You realize that? I always make sure I tell everybody I was in jail with Silas and Paul, and they go, "Well, what are you talking about?" But one of the things that I really enjoyed was we spent a lot of time singing, and I remember there was this policeman. He was an ex-policeman, and I can't remember what his name is, but he had a French Bible, and he was just loud, and he loved to read the Bible, and he would read that Bible, and it was just loud, and it was just, I was sitting there listening to him, and I couldn't understand a word he said, but he would, and after a while, it seemed like the Haitian language was a guttural language to me. I don't understand why, but it was just very interesting in the way that they talked, and him reading this Bible, and I could actually, because I had all these little Bibles, and sometimes he would read in the places where I could follow along with him. But to me, it was the singing. I had a lot of memories about the singing, and not just our singing, but we heard singing, and it was other people singing, and it wasn't just any songs. It was hymns. You could tell they were hymns, and I really enjoyed that. So
that's good. Thanks, Steve.
about you, Silas?
I think it was the same thing. There's something just unexplainably sweet about and it seemed like it would often come, maybe an hour after sunset, and you just kind of almost just don't even know what to do because it's 7:30 and it's black, and then I think his name was Maurice, and another one of the guys would come in, and even sometimes they would come in the middle of the night if they would notice we were awake, and Maurice would be on his knees, and he would have his arms raised, and he's singing in Creole, and we would be they were songs that we knew, so we were able to sing with him. They would remind me of some of the of our trips to the Middle East, and some of the just authentic worship that we would experience, in a illegal house church or something like that. There was a similarity to there was no earthly benefit to the men to be singing these songs. They were crying out to God. They were worshiping God, and the same with us. And I remember we would try all day sometimes to write down all the verses we could think of to a song. And every person, we were able to piece together some version of a lot of hymns. But I think the singing was.
Yeah, we may have rewritten a few hymns, but it's how we remembered them. I think the same is for me. The singing every night it was boisterous singing. It wasn't timid, someone might hear me singing. This was, listen, man, let's just bless the living God. And they would sing a song in Creole, we'd sing a song in English. Sometimes we'd sing the same song, because many of these songs were hymns of the faith, and they would sing in Creole while we're singing in English. One for me, an additional thing that I really cherish about those days was every Sunday we could hear the Haitian church in the area that they were meeting outside. Most of their churches are open air kind of settings anyway. They don't have closed in buildings, and we could hear them singing in the distance, and we could hear they're singing mostly in Creole. But again, the familiar tune was such that we would join in with them and sing these songs as we remembered them in English. Maybe a mumble or two, as I couldn't remember a particular word or something, but largely a real sweet, passionate, no holds bar kind of singing. It was really sweet. I never want to forget that kind of worship. So most difficult experience behind bars. What do you recall?
I think aside from the physical of the bathroom and then some of the late parts of the first week, food-wise, were difficult. But I think aside from some of the physical elements, there was as we would come back from court with a new charge, there would be it would be just not even right away, but at some point the day after, there would be a realization of the weight of the charges that they would be bringing against us, and then I would realize that I'm 19, and if I think of a charge of child trafficking, and here is coming with an incredibly long sentence, and I'm considering what does a life sentence look like, even if in the conditions your life expectancy is not going to be 70 years, but I'm looking at even if I live to be 50, I'm looking at 31 years in a prison like this. And there was a heavy kind of a depression that would come after that was, and the whole experience was very roller coaster, because the weight of it would fall, and then the rejoicing in God, regardless of the weight, was a strange mixture of the sweetness right next to the hard.
One of the things I looked at is kind of the same thing, but it was the next day when we woke up, because when we went in there it was dark, and I don't remember being able to see much. There was this little light that shined in the window, and it kind of lit a little bit of the cell up, and we really didn't see much there. But the next day I looked at it, and I went and looked at the walls, and the walls was filled with human excrement, and they used it as writing. They didn't have anything to write with, and so they would just fill it up, and the walls were all just covered with human excrement. And I'm going, we're sitting in this stuff. And along with that, that up and down, you're going out. Oh, you're going to get out. You're going to get out. And then the next day it was like, well, you're going to get out. And then go back. And we would go out and take our stuff, and then we were going to we gave all of our watches away because we weren't going to be back, and so the guys didn't have anything. So it ended up being where it was kind of an interesting deal, because we had all these watches, and every time they would ask us all the time, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? And then after we came back and we didn't have our watches anymore because they had them, and then we were always asking them, what time is it? What time is it? And I think some of them were a little irritated with us about, okay, well, now maybe we need to give our watches back,
Yeah, that was a memorable. We eventually made a sundial on the wall where, of course, we could only tell the time for several hours during the daytime. Once the sun set, we had no idea what time it was actually, and we'd think it would be midnight, but really it was like 6 o'clock in the evening. And that's how those kind of times went. And yeah, I would echo the same. That emotional roller coaster of the ups and the downs, the confusion of everything. As I shared with you, I think last week, our first day to court was that Monday. So we were arrested on Saturday. We spent all day Sunday. By the way, we gathered the five of us and the five women with a metal door between us. We had our first church service there. We read scripture together and we sang songs together. And then Monday, our first day to court, we're being told we're going to go to court, and we're being told that we have a lawyer who will be there representing us. And of course, we had not contacted anybody. And so that was, for us, a little bit of, I'm sitting there going, I obviously we're learning this judicial system on the fly, so apparently he's a court-ordered lawyer. So I'm thinking wrong on everything. When in all reality, this gentleman who showed up to court to represent us is a cousin to the president of the country. And Renee can probably help me know how this pieced together. Were they communicating with you guys at this time? I don't know, did you guys hire him? I kind of get a little lost on this side of it. But okay, and that's always for me a little bit of a discovery of that, because he's telling us he's doing all of this pro bono. So this is because he wants to kick out all of the corruption of his country, while he's extorting us with the families, telling us it's $10,000 for all of them, and because they didn't pay soon enough, now it's up to $10,000 per person, and we go home. And of course, we don't know all of that dialogue is going on. We just know that he's there to represent us. No one, if I recall this correctly, on that Monday in court, nobody asked us or talked to us about anything. The lawyer did all of the talking. The lawyer did all of the negotiating, and we went home.
We spent all of that day in a room with
That's
crates
true.
full of machetes.
That's true. That's
Like
just
like
true.
you do with real criminals. You just put them in a room.
Put them in a room full of
crates
machetes.
full of machetes.
yeah.
But they were pointing guns at us to keep us in there, so it was interesting.
So this is true. We're really not are even in front of the judge. We're initially, we are eventually taken in to the room where the judge is at, where our lawyer's been negotiating with him all day, and come to find out he's really been negotiating money with our families, and because we haven't agreed to do anything with him, he agrees with the judge that we should go home with the charge of trafficking, or kidnapping of children. That's our first charge, kidnapping. That we had these children without anyone's permission. That essentially, they were telling the story that we were just driving the bus around the city picking up kids off the street from everywhere that we could find a kid. And so that eventually gets reported to the news agencies, and that becomes the story. Day one, we've been driving around the city kidnapping children, and so we were stopped from doing that, and now we're behind bars. And so we go back to jail that night. Come to find out, I think our families at home fired him, and without our knowledge of that, we fired him because we went to court and didn't have any opportunity to speak our case, and came home with a charge. The day prior, we didn't have formal charges. Come to find out, they had broken an international law that they could not hold us overnight. They could not hold us at any point without a formal charge. And so they eventually got a charge for us so they could properly hold us. And so that was the first start of this roller coaster emotion of everyone sending you out, patting you on the back, telling you thanks for coming, thanks for what you've been doing, only to be told you're going back and you now have a new charge on you. So second day in court, Tuesday, we don't know who our lawyer is because we've already fired him, and our families have fired him. And so we're told we have representation. And I think this night, Monday night, a gentleman showed up as telling us he was our lawyer. And he brought clothes in, he brought crates. Our jail cell eventually had so much stuff in it, we couldn't hardly stay in it. We have a corner filled up with crackers and various kinds of things, and clothes,
Shirts and
underwear that didn't fit, and
The shirts were like triple X's.
right.
Fit me well.
The underwear was really small and the shirts were really big, but it was clean. So it was sweet, wasn't it? I learned quickly: do not look bad at the gift of God.
Except for the suits. They give you some suits at the very end, and you wouldn't wear them.
I don't remember a suit, but they did give me a clean shirt that day, and I was happy to. Yeah, it was an interesting. I'm sure the suit didn't fit me.
No.
I mean, I'm 40 pounds lighter then, and I'm still bigger than most Haitians. So yeah, that becomes, so day two we're in court by a gentleman. He's identifying us as he's not a Haitian, but he has permission to practice Haitian law. So I don't know what's required to practice Haitian law, but he was the man representing us. He was a Jewish man by descent, living in the Dominican Republic, and had bodyguards with him.
Was that George?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Had bodyguards with him everywhere. We spent most of that day in the same room with the machetes as the day before. Lawyers in the room with the judge. Lots of dialogue, lots of, I'm sure, discussing what's going on. At this point, again, contact with our families at home, mostly with the men, the husbands of the wives. Because remember here, we're in a partnered relationship with Central Valley Baptist Church in Meridian, who is really the lead church in this ordeal. And so the husbands are doing most of the dialogue regarding their wives. And our families, Renee at this point has moved in with the Steinekes. I don't know what day you moved in with the Steinekes, but so at this point, by Tuesday, your dad and David have arrived from Kansas and Omaha. Yeah. Renee's going to tell some of her side of the experience next week that I think will be really helpful for us to hear that as well. What she's experiencing, what the church is experiencing from that vantage point. But again, discussions are being made with the husbands of the wives who are in jail and fathers of those who are in jail with us. And so anyway, somewhere along the way, our lawyer, I don't know if do you guys remember, does he just totally disappear, or what do you remember? It's like nobody knew where he was. And come to find out, this is obviously a high profile issue in Haiti. All of the global media is camped outside of the jail. I mean, for me to drive by this place today, I'm shocked at how many buses and vans and tents were set up just outside of the jail. I don't know how they all got in there, but they're all camped out there. They're all waiting for a story to tell. And so this is global media is just camped outside of the jail. And somehow in their investigations, a tip from Interpol comes in that the man who's representing us is a known criminal.
Child abductor, that's what he was charged with.
Yeah, he was a trafficker of children. And so we go home day 2 with not only kidnapping charges that we still haven't been able to address, but now we have trafficking charges levied against us because of which I think on Tuesday we go home with 2 charges. One is trafficking and the other is criminal association, because we're being represented by an international criminal. So,
and if I remember right, he came to our rescue because he was the one that Laura had gone to get papers to get him to get the kids into the Dominican Republic, if I remember right.
Yeah, there's so much that I still don't know some of the ins and outs of that level of the details, but there was something that had him connected with, and he was aware of our need and such. So by Wednesday now, we're in court and we have kidnapping, trafficking, and criminal association, and no representation at this point, because we didn't need to fire him. He went running, but we surely would have fired him as well. So this is the start of this roller coaster emotion that I think all of us at different levels would experience. Hey, you're going home today. Thanks again for coming. Hey, can we have your watches? I think somewhere along the way, Steve even leaves his razor with the men, because we're surely not coming back. And so, yeah, they needed a razor. That's only because every time we came back, we found your razor in different places in the room.
And it was empty. It was an electric razor, and one of the guys had a whole head of hair when we left. His hair was clear, pretty long, and then when we got home, it was all shaved.
Yeah. So Steve was generous and gave his razor after they all used it.
And it was kind of just another level of the strange feeling of that no one thought we should, because you don't leave razors with people that you put into prison as well.
Right. So we're pushing into the first week, and essentially every day we go to jail, or we go to the courthouse. So Silas, explain the transition from the jail to the courthouse. What was that like?
It's probably the most realistic danger that we were in at any point was when we're in a vehicle. Because everyone there drives, it's kind of an insanity, and then the whole city is in turmoil and collapse to begin with, and so everyone is just driving everywhere that they can get their vehicle. But then you give someone a siren, and it's like this, just this freedom to just drive insane, just fly through roundabouts and on the wrong sides of the roads and up onto the medians. And if nothing's moving here, you go over the median and into this side and up onto that sidewalk, and it's weaving through people, and all at decent speeds. And we're all in the back of like a SUV type thing.
Yeah, I thought it was like a B210, pickup. It was a small. We had like 10 people or 12 people in the back of this thing.
No seat belts.
Mario Andretti driving, and it was just zoom, 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 and it was all you could do to hang on.
Yeah.
So.
To get out of the jail, we were immediately mugged by the media. So right as we walk out of the door to get into the vehicles, the media is just all over us, pushing, sticking microphones in our faces, getting cameras in our faces. And the police would escort us to get into the vehicles, and essentially pushing us and shoving us to get into the vehicles while the media is just all over the place. And then, as Silas and Steve described to you, we have this bizarre journey through the city. Nobody pulls over for the police with his siren going, which is why he's just all over the place to get to the courthouse. And of course, there's no rush. We'd get there and wait in the room with the machetes for hours before we do anything. But that's how they would get us there. It was a mad rush. And somehow, in the mad rush to get to the courthouse, the media would beat us there.
Yeah, they beat us there.
Of course, they're riding motorcycles, and so their ability to scoot through the city a little bit better. Of course, some of the media is camped out at the courthouse as well, but they're racing us to the courthouse the whole time. And
didn't one of the media people went down on a motorcycle behind us one time?
Yeah.
Got really injured.
Yeah, a big truck ran over him. It was that bizarre of an unnecessary rush to do this. But we get to the courthouse, and again, just mobbed by the media, pushed and shoved, and insulted along the way. Again, part of that emotional roller coaster ride involved some of that, the kind of insults that they would levy against us.
One of the things that really bothered me was you see these old movies with the crime, bosses, and they've got this thing over their head. And they tried to do that to us. And the first day, I kind of let them do that, but I said, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. They would take that thing and put it over your head to keep you from being photographed and filmed. And I was going, no, I'm not guilty of anything. I'm not going to cower to these people. And so we ended up not doing that anymore. So,
which is kind of an interesting thing. We talk about the hardship that the media was for us, as well as the perplexing issues. We're not even done telling you all of the lawyer stories, the trouble and the hardship that comes with the lawyers. But we have this love-hate relationship with the media that I'm convinced, had the media not been there, we would be in Haiti. From all reported events, we could have still been there, even today. Because these kinds of things happen frequently.
Maurice, I had talking to Maurice, and Maurice had been there for 2 months, and he had still not gone to court.
Right.
And we had gone to court like 3 or 4 times when I found that out. So.
Right. So you have this media that's insulting and really telling a second story. They're not really reporting facts they'll report a partial fact along the way to keep the narrative moving along. But unless the media is there to keep the hype on it, we likely are forgotten in a Haitian jail until extortion pays its way out. That's the way the system works. You really stay in jail until somebody comes up with enough cash to get you out. And of course, we don't know that on the front ends of the days, but we learned this to be the case, and so now it's a blessing that the media is insulting us most of the time, telling a false narrative, but they're keeping the pressure on the court, on the judicial system. You got to do something with the 10 Americans. So, and then as to also learn the benefit it was for you to see pictures of us, that we were still alive. We somewhat looked well. Steve was the only clean-shaven guy from time to time, but actually, I don't think you were.
I had a beard.
But
I was pretty clean shaven.
Silas was pretty
Just
clean.
natural.
A little bit of scruff. He's 19 years old, so what are you going to do? One of the blessed things that I would learn later on is that Silas had a red hat, and this red hat would be some of the things that family would begin to look for. Where's the red hat? Because they would know this is Silas. And so the opportunities that proved itself to be part of the hardest hurdle to overcome, at the same time, by the grace of God, proved to be one of the things that really sped the process up of it.
Yeah, I remember a time when we had to go to court, and there was half of us stayed in the jail and half of us went, and it was okay. If you understand, there's rubble everywhere, and you're walking along, and you have to watch where you walked. And so when I got out of this jail and we had to go to the car, and so then I heard this guy yelling at me, and it was Carl, the CNN guy, and he stuck a microphone in my mouth, and he said, Jim, your mother is just really worried about you, and she wants you to talk to her, and she went on and on and on. And it was just, I was sitting there, he was backing up, and he was tripping, and there was like cameras, they call them photogs, and they were all taking pictures, and there were 3 or 4 of them around us, and we were walking, and he called me Jim. And so I just looked up at him and said, first of all, my name's not Jim. And then I just kept walking. And all the photogs were going, what did he say? What did he say? And the next time I walked out there, it was like, how you doing, Carl? He said, I'm doing good, Steve.
It was. We laughed a lot, by the way, somewhat as a survival tactic. There really were some joyful moments. We clearly don't have time to tell every aspect and every detail. I wish for you to know as much as we experienced in those days. But I want to talk about Alex for a moment. Alex is a young man that we meet the day before we're arrested outside of the children's home on the street. And I don't know if you remember, last week I was sharing with you that he had invited me to come up to his parents' place where they had gathered some children that they couldn't find parents for. And he wanted me to come up and see the children and wanted to know if we could take them with them. And I told him, Alex, we can't. We have to do this by the book. Come to find out, if we'd have done it, if we'd have not used proper protocol in doing so, we probably would have been home within a couple of days and a safe passage through the border and no problems of any kind. But because we had made the decision ahead of time, we would do things this certain way. I had to tell Alex, we can't take the children with us, but if you'll stay in touch with the gentleman at the children's home, here's a phone number, a contact for us. We can stay in dialogue and communication about this, and perhaps we'll be able to give some assistance and some help. So we're arrested on Saturday, and Sunday, sometime midday on Sunday, a young man came walking through that outer police officer's office just outside of the jail cell. And he's coming in asking for the Americans. And he has with him a little grocery bag filled with, my journal, I read through this again, and I don't know exactly how many, but there were about 7 oranges, and several packets of individually wrapped crackers. Oh, little mandarin oranges, yeah. Crackers that he called cookies, which got me pretty excited. And some hard candies, I think. And he says that was when we first learned from Alex, even though we had had MREs the night before, that we were learning that the only way you get food in a Haitian jail is if your family brings it to you. So this was our first meal outside of the media blitz and the pressure from that Alex brought us our first meal. And it wasn't enough to sustain us, but it was a kindness from God. And he said, we've gathered this from our people, and we've brought this by for you. And he introduced himself again. I immediately recognized, oh, this is the young man we met outside of the children's home. And so we blessed the Lord for it. We thanked him for the mandarin oranges, and the candies, and the crackers. And I think he may have had some water with him. Because as Silas told you earlier, the water in the jail, we're not drinking any of that stuff. Did you ever filter any of that?
Yeah. I had a filter when and I actually drank some, but it was
still murky when he drank.
But I put it through that filter, and it actually didn't get sick. So
you should be on a commercial advertising how effective that filter was. So we'll begin to see Alex every day. Without fail, well, let me back that off. One day he did not show up, but he sent someone else to come by and bring food for us.
Junior.
And that was a gentleman by the name of Junior, who also we met outside the children's home that day. And so every day it's a little bit of something. It's not enough to sustain any one person, much less 10 people. And every day he comes he comes in with a giant smile. He comes in blessing the Lord, grateful for what we're doing, telling us, do not give up. He begins writing notes and passing them to us in the bags that he sends us. And I begin writing him notes back. And so I actually have most of the letters from him. And I assume he probably has thrown away the letters that I wrote to him. But these letters are littered with scripture. Encouragements, don't give up. Of course, the English is really bad, but to me, that's some of the most treasured part of these letters. And matter of fact, before you leave tonight or next Sunday night, you're totally free to look through my book and look at these letters. He addresses us by name. He's working. He eventually finds the lawyer who will eventually set us free, who will represent us formally and realistically. His name is Rory, as I never can say his name. But there's one more lawyer in the mix who largely does a bulk of the work, but again, there's a lot of extortion behind the scenes. Him telling us, I'm using you guys to break up this corruption in my country. We want it out of here. And all along the way, there's a whole nother story being told to our families back in Meridian and here in Twin Falls and in Amarillo and in Kansas. But Alex will eventually bring the gentleman who will represent us. And what Alex has done is he's also, because he's stayed in contact with where the children are at. They had been moved into a temporary children's home under a big tent, led under the control of the Australians, I believe. And in that, they've tracked where the children are at. They went and made the phone calls off of our registration with nearest living relatives. They went and found these children. They went and found their parents. And they came to court to testify that we were not just driving the bus around. They gave the children to us. The home gave the children to us, not the parents, but the parents gave permission to the home to give the children to us. And so that they came and testified all of these things, which was a big part of the proving of our innocence, that eventually we are dismissed. But along the way, there are several what we can only explain as providential moments of messengers from God. So let me introduce you to a couple of them. If I say the name Buddy Ship.
It's for the infection.
Okay, you might have friendship, but we had Buddy Ship.
Yeah, we had a buddy. He was fun.
So Buddy Ship by the way, his wife contacted me a couple of years ago that he had passed away. And it was a touching, moving moment to hear the news of his passing. But Buddy Ship showed up. I don't know what day it was. It's the total. It's all drafted out here somewhere in here. But within that first week, he shows up with malaria pills for us. Because we left in such a hurry. We didn't even go get shots before we left. You got shots? How did you get shots? I think I did get a tetanus shot because my tetanus shot was way overdue, but I didn't have any other shots.
I had like 6 of them.
Oh, that's why you didn't.
Rabies shots and all that stuff.
Did you have any shots?
I had none.
Yeah, well, don't tell your mother that. So he comes in with malaria pills. Of course, we come to find out he's a Marine medic, retired. But he just goes around the world responding to global disasters. And he shows up as a humanitarian, a God-fearing man. Takes a registry of us in the jail. He writes all our names down. It's one of the things I probably laugh the most about and love telling as often as I possibly can. Is while he's going through the list of the men and he's writing our names down, he's Steve and Jim and Drew and I'm Paul and Silas says, I'm Silas. And as soon as he hears Paul and Silas, he drops his clipboard. I got nothing else to do here. Paul and Silas are in jail. They're going home. So it would be weeks later before we'd go home. He would show up several times with necessary medications, gave good care to Carissa, who was a diabetic and had to be taken to the hospital several times. And he would go along and give good, compassionate care to us.
One of the ladies had big, huge mosquito bites, open sores on her arms, and it was.
Yeah, and Jim as well was very allergic to mosquito bites and all of the other bugs. We don't think they were all mosquito bites, but there were at least mosquito bites on the parts where the other bugs didn't bite.
Yeah. Silas's arms were just covered with them. I just remember those. Terrible.
So he shows up with medications, with soothing ointments, he shows up with water, cases of water, occasionally with a little bit more, a little bit of food, but not much usually. But come to find out, he would usually have to negotiate with the policeman to get back to us. So he would have to trade off some of his own personal gear, his tent, his various things that he would trade off, basically in exchange of a bribe to be able to bring the supplies into us. And so they didn't mind him coming because he usually came with gifts for them as well. I don't know how many times would I remember, and Steve and Silas, you might be able to think through some of the other times where we were out of water, and the only thing we knew to do was we need to pray, because we don't have any way to make contact with our home. Say, we need you to send water for us. And so we would gather up, the 5 of us men would gather and we'd pray. We'd ask the Lord, do this for your glory. We need water. And there were a couple of times, even while we're praying, that a stranger would walk through the door with a case of water. And so, the learning of the providential, sovereign hand of God was probably among some of the greatest things I would learn in those days. That nothing in the experience caught our God by surprise. He was aware of our needs long before we knew we even had needs. And that was a kindness from God. So we need to at least talk about the macaroni and cheese because we brought it up last week. Not every day. Well, every day we go to court, we interact with the media. And it's usually a pushing and a shoving and a bunch of name calling, just in the getting out of the jail and getting into the courthouse. But in the jail, in order to get access in to talk to us, they would come in bearing gifts. And sometimes it was food, sometimes water. And this particular time was with several different varieties of MREs. And I don't know who the guys are talking to at this point, but it becomes clear that the macaroni and cheese, you don't want to miss the macaroni and cheese.
You'll love the macaroni.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to love.
That was a CBS guy.
I think you're right. It was CBS.
And he would, you're really going to like this.
Yeah, it's like, well, that's really odd. I mean, who doesn't like macaroni and cheese? But you're really going to like the macaroni and cheese. And so I think Drew ended up with he went through and found the macaroni and cheese. It had already been opened. And they had given us a cell phone. The CBS put a cell phone in the macaroni and cheese. And it was so that we could call home.
So they could listen to us call.
And so our conspiracy-minded minds, immediately we removed the battery from the phone, and we were convinced they were listening. Eventually, a new inmate, actually several inmates would be added to the room, so it gets much more crowded even than when we first got there. But it's clear that one of them is an informant.
An ex-policeman.
Yeah, a type of informant that he's put in here to listen to our conversations so that when we go back to court, they'll have something to hang us on.
And Buddy was the one that says, you realize that they can speak better English than you can.
This is when we learned we no longer needed our translator to work through the Spanish speaker to then communicate in Creole to the Creole inmates that they weren't perfect English speakers, but we had some English-speaking conversations after that point. So there's these kinds of experiences. Again, every day, without fail, of that one day when Alex sends someone else in his place, that Alex comes to the jail. And some of those days, I even remember it was strange that he hadn't come by before we had to go to court. And we get to court, and there's Alex.
And he's in the courtroom with us, too. It was amazing because he always seemed to show up. And it was like he just was there, and he was always very friendly and smiling, and he was always very encouraging. That was one of the highlights of my days, was looking for him. Alex is coming. Alex is going to be here. And Junior, he came, he got to be really good friends. We got to be really good friends with Junior. And there was another lady named Florence that would always go to the ladies' side and help them.
So again, there's so much more. My goodness, the unraveling of this story and to be able to express the experiences, probably even at some level perplexing to even comprehend them, even for me 10 years down the road. But let me at least ask this question to you guys, and we'll kind of aim toward wrapping this up tonight. And then next week, what I want to do is talk about the release, the things that happened in the last couple of days, the last weekend, and then kind of the days that would follow, the weeks that would follow, the months that would follow, and the experiences that it was on us, and what that was like coming home. But how would you say, Silas and Steve, what would you say your days in jail, about the days in jail, how did they impact your life?
That song we just got done singing, Just a Closer Walk, it impacts your life in that you're there because the Lord wants you to be, and you're going to be there until He wants you to get out. And nothing we could do could make that happen any faster. And I just basically said, it stinks back there in the bathroom, but I've made some really good friends here, being Pastor Paul and Jim. I just really enjoyed him. I just really got close to him. And Drew, I didn't know anything with Drew, but we would sit there and talk for hours about all the things that Jim was going to make, and we were going to do all this stuff, and I was going to teach them all how to play the guitar, and it was just a lot of things. And watching Silas draw, he was actually a really good drawer. I'm surprised he's not a professional painter, you know. But it just, to me, it was the camaraderie. We had a closeness. There was a lot of singing. There was a lot of fellowship, a lot of praying. You wake up in the middle of the night because you can't sleep, and it's, you know, there's mosquitoes just buzzing in your ears, and you can't, and so you wake up and see Paul, because the only place that was in the whole jail where we were at there was one place where you could get light, and when it's dark, I can't read, but Paul's sitting over there in the middle of the night with his Bible up here, and he's reading, and it's like, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you look at that and you go, wow, he can't sleep either, but he is spending his time getting closer to the Lord. And to me, that's what it was for me. I got to pray for Marge Lawley, and anyway, it was just highly important there.
Silas?
I remember that too, Steve. I would wake up, in the middle of the night and kind of look around, and there's only 4 of us, and it would be kind of a moment of panic. And then I would look out through the door, and I very distinctly remember the sight of my dad with the Bible up, trying to catch the light through the prison windows. I would not, given the power to take any of it back, I would not. And I think as far as how it's affected my life, there's a difference between the immediate after the experience, where I'm really wrestled with myself in a lot of ways. But overall, there was 2 kind of quotes, in a sense, that sort of summed up the whole experience of what God did in my life. The last one, I think it would have been the last Sunday we were there. I think they were singing it in English, or at least in Creole, and we were able to recognize that at this church gathering, they're singing "Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus," and I think the entire experience is this just a very real manifestation of Silas, turn your eyes upon Jesus. And all of these things, the sovereignty of God is, if you ever want to see the sovereignty of God in an amazing way, you just go to prison in Haiti. And you would watch Alex just walk through the police line, through the media. Everyone else is getting stopped, and somehow Alex just flows through it all. And we've been praying for water, and here comes Alex, who's, by all averages, making something like $2 a day or a month. Alex is bringing more food in than he could afford to bring in. And one of the last day, when Alex somehow is able to come through everything, his broken English is incredibly sweet in those days, and he's pronouncing today as the day of your release, and that's not how he said it, but the time before, and maybe every time, he would come and he would say, "Be more stronger than never." And in its incorrect English, it was sort of this, be more strong in God, because you can never be. You have no hope except for what God is in your life. And I think the having turned my eyes to Jesus in that moment, and in its realness, has, even to these days, I can, it's easy to get distracted, and out of nowhere, I'll remember, you've seen what God can do, and now you're worrying about these things that are nothing. And there's no aspect of my life that I think was unaffected by it. Largely, it through God's mercy, it took Bianca to sort of pull me back from the edge, and she's not in here right now, but I am extremely grateful to her in those days, and you as a church. I would often, when I would get to church, I would have been up in the South Hills camping for 2 or 3 days, and I would come down on Sunday morning, and I would get in kind of late, and there'd be a seat by maybe Betsy or something, and I would just stink of camp smoke, and she would graciously let me sit by her, and Brad's friendship through those days. But I think there was, now it's over a third of my life ago, those days. But there is still this call to turn your eyes upon Jesus.
That's good. And, it's still so surprising to me that I still can't talk about these days without weeping. I cannot. And they're weepings of joy for the treasured experience that the things I learned of God are beyond measure. And so, some of the things, that reality, especially as the days turned into weeks at that point, and there's some level of likely now, I don't want to hear anyone tell me today you're going to go home. I don't want to hear it anymore. I look for places to get away from people, and of course the only place that I can be in that whole jail place is in the bathroom. And I would want to go there, because I'm at the spot where I'm beginning to say, God, I don't get what's happening. I can't explain it. Of course, there's this constant emotional battle that's waging war against my spirit that is saying, Paul, listen, you just keep believing this word. Your God is in sovereign control of everything. Read it, believe it. And then I'd want to go back into that nasty bathroom and argue with God about, eventually the American Red Cross started bringing 1 meal a day to us. And I'm so ashamed of myself. I'd get back there and argue with God that they put too many beans in my rice that day.
That's all there were beans.
And whatever that meat was good.
Didn't crawl.
But I found myself at this enormous, perplexing conflict in my mind. In the reality that if we don't get out of here, I don't ever go home. The kind of years they're talking about on each child, so we have 33 children, 3 years for each child for this charge, 5 for this charge, and 2 for another charge, each of them stacking up. I'm never going home. If Silas goes home, he goes home an old man. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And of course, I didn't do anything. This, as you heard Silas say, I would say the same thing today. I wouldn't trade, if I had the ability, I wouldn't trade a single one of those heart-wrenching, difficult, complex days for anything. They are indeed some of the sweetest days in my life. And yet I still weep when I talk about them. Probably because I'm still wrestling with how my flesh would wage war with my spirit and the complexity of it.
There was one song that always went through my mind, and it was from I used to do children's worship at Lighthouse, and it was a song called God is So Great. God is so great, so strong and so mighty, there's nothing my God cannot do.
Yeah. Amen.
And same way, I had to get to that place. I said, Lord, if you want me to stay here until I die or until I am 30 years old or older, then that's okay, because where you want me to be, that's the right place to be. Because we had just gotten done talking about Watchman Nee. We'd sitting there and, Watchman Nee spent all his life, the end of his life in prison for doing what God wanted him to do. And what was I to say no? My God is so great and powerful. Nothing is impossible for him. And he just let me out, because I could have had to stay there. But because he was merciful to me, we got out.
Yeah, and that getting out came at a great effort to prove innocence. And to be able to do so in 19 days, where we get home and we learn of missionaries that spend years in a Haitian jail before they ever get a day in court. And so then the wrestle in my mind starts all over again. What a pathetic complainer you are, Paul. And so, I want to wrap this up in this manner. Next week we'll talk about these final concluding days, the release, and then perhaps even more in a more touching way, in a more personal way. What is it like when we get home, and what are some of the things that each of these guys have expressed already in that journey, in what God's going to continue to teach us about ourselves, and even in that, what are things happening in my mind and in our minds together about what really does it mean to be a church, and have what we've been doing, is it a true and accurate expression of what a church looks like? One of the things I struggle with the most while we're in jail is I have prepared nobody to endure this. And this is the normal experience when I read this New Testament book. That the Christian, this is the normal experience. What I experience, what you and I taste in this blessed day as in a Western culture in the United States of America, this is not the normal experience of the Christian. And in reality, I had prepared nobody to endure anything. And I want to adjust what we do as a church. These days in the Haitian jail, I came home a different husband. I came home a different father. And I came home a different pastor. And so none of those things would have happened had we not gone through these sweet and glorious days. And you know what? I would go to jail with these two brothers any day for the cause of the gospel, not for breaking the law. If they break the law, they're on their own. We'll visit you. By the grace of God, though, there's a snapshot of those days. So listen, you find some time. You ought to have Silas and Bianca over to your house sometime and let them just tell their story, show you his notes, his illustrations. You need to have Steve come over sometime and just let him open up his heart, share those hard, sweet days with the Lord. I have notes. There's so much we can't tell you. The ladies had a cell phone all the time, and so we actually had communication to home, pretty limited. I was able to pass notes through this big iron door to the ladies, mostly through Karina or Nicole, and notes to send a text message to Renee. I've got all of those messages written down on the notes that I sent through the door, that they sent back messages from her. So where we were able to have communication, though, there was this unusual experience of it all. So let me leave this with you. About the weekend we were released, which is where we'll pick the story up next week. A stranger walked by the outside door of the ladies' cell and dropped a note through the cell door and into the women's room. And I don't know how I ended up with it, but I ain't giving it back to anybody. It says this: we are in contact with Mr. Ritchie and Caleb, your lawyers. I never knew these guys by these names. No one had ever represented us in court by the name of Mr. Ritchie or Caleb, your lawyers. We have your escort and safe house ready when you need. I am monitoring your release and will be here to personally escort you. Michael. I've never met Michael. I did not know at that moment who Mr. Ritchie was, and I had no idea who Caleb was. So, we'll tell that story next week. All right? That's not intended to be a cliffhanger. It's because it's too long of a story, and we need to go home. But it's part of the miraculous, God-glorifying release that involves a man by the name of Mr. Ritchie and a lawyer by the name of Caleb. Only those from Kansas will recognize this man's name, Caleb Stegall. So, how does a lawyer from Kansas become part of the story? Well, come on back next week, all right? And we'll share that. Let's pray together. Steve, will you pray for us?